Hi, my name is Joanne from 123stitch.com. Have you ever done this? I stitched this beautiful design by Heart and Hand Needle Arts called 2026 Collector's Heart. I used the linen that they provided. I used the beautiful cottage garden threads that came with it, and I found the perfect red frame to show it all off. I decided I needed an extra ½ inch of fabric showing around the edges inside of my frame. And then I carefully measured and cut on the ½ inch line. And that is totally wrong. That doesn't give me enough room to turn the fabric back onto the mounting board. I needed at least another inch around, an inch or two all the way around, so that I could easily turn it back and attach it to my mounting board. It's not gonna work. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it into a pillow, but it's still such a small amount of fabric on the edges that I'm gonna add fabric around the edges before we put our pillow together. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But the moral of the story is measure twice, cut once. They say that for a reason. Before we get started, please go down below and click on that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos. And the products I mentioned today will also be listed as a link down below. Now, some of the supplies you're going to need besides your stitched piece is a cutting board, and I like to use a quilting ruler because it helps me get those exact straight lines. And along with that, I use a rotary cutter. You can also use regular scissors and any straight edge if you prefer. You will need a fabric for the strips of fabric around the edges, and I've chosen this solid color. You can use anything you want. With this busier design, I thought I'd go with a solid color fabric for the strips around the edges. And then you need a backing fabric, and I've chosen this print for the back of mine. You will need a sewing machine. We're going to sew some simple seams, nothing difficult, but you do need a sewing machine to do that. I suppose you could do it by hand, but it would be a whole lot harder. You will need some stuffing for your pillow, and I like to use Polyester Fiberfill. I've had this bag forever. It lasts forever. You can also use walnut shells, poly pellets. Some people use rice. Depends on the size of the pillow and how you want to stuff it. But I like to use that. And this package comes with this little wooden stick to help you poke the stuffing into the corners. You can also use the eraser end of a pencil. You can use a chopstick, anything you want. We will be sewing around the edges of our pillow and have the opening in the back. So to sew the back closed, you'll want some sharp chenille sharp point needles, any size, and a matching thread. And I have a DMC floss that I'm going to use for the thread because I don't have a matching sewing thread. And last thing we're going to need is, once we cut that opening on the back, we're going to sew it closed, but then we're going to want to cover the stitched area because it's not going to be very pretty. And I use these little felt embellishments, but I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. That's the supplies we need, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now we can start putting our pillow together. A couple of things I forgot to mention that you might want are some pins or clips to hold the fabric in place while you're sewing it. And then also, whenever I'm making a pillow, I like to use Fusible iron-on interfacing on the back side of my stitched area. You just press it on with an iron and it seals those threads in place. It protects them when you're stuffing the pillow. It's a nice little extra thing I like to do to kind of keep my stitched piece safe. It's not necessary, but I like to use it. Next, we're going to cut our fabric strips. And what I like to do is 2½ inch wide strips. Just cut them to 2½ inches, but cut them wider than you need them to be. We're going to trim that down afterwards. We're not going to worry about getting it exactly right because then we may be off by a little bit. So it's better to trim it after we sew it. So I've got two. I'm going to do the top and the bottom first, and then I will do the sides on the other two pieces afterwards. So I'm just going to line this up very carefully because I do not have a lot of fabric to play with. So I'm going to line it up carefully and pin it in place. And then I'll be going to the sewing machine and sewing. So I'm going to do the top and the bottom first. Let's get these in place. Fabric is fraying here. Okay, Now that that's sewed in place, I'll be going to the sewing machine and I'll be doing a 1/4-inch seam from the not the whole length of the fabric, but from the stitched area across on the top and the bottom. I'm going to be using 1/4-inch seams because I do not have a lot of fabric to play with. If you have more, then do a 1/2 inch or whatever size seam allowance you prefer. Whatever you do, try to keep it consistent throughout so that everything lines up perfectly. You don't want to do a 1/2 inch one place, a 1/4 inch somewhere else. So I'm going to do a 1/4 inch on both the top and the bottom. I'm going to go sew those and I will be back to show you the next step. Okay, you can see that I have sewed my seams down, and what I did is I went ahead and trimmed it a little bit to get rid of some of the bulk, and then I pressed the seam towards the fabric. And then on this side, I pressed it down as well, so everything's nice and flat and even. Now what we want to do is trim the edges here. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler and line it up, and then just trim this excess fabric off. Do that on all 4 sides. Whoops. Okay, do it on these 2 sides. The quilting ruler is nice because you can see that you've got it lined up perfectly. All right, that's all trimmed off. Now we're going to need to do the other 2 sides. So what we're going to do is get 2 more strips of fabric, and again we want them to be longer on each side. Pin them in place this way. Sew our 1/4 inch seam again all the way down, and then I'll trim and press the seams again and come back and show you how to do the last part. Okay, I have sewn my other pieces on and I pressed the seams towards the outside again, trimmed them if needed, and I've already trimmed these 2 edges off. Now I'm just going to trim these 2 so they match again. Just line that up. Get my rotary cutter over here. Trim that. Trim this side. Okay, there we go. There's our top. I like that a lot. That's looking really good. Now what I've done is I cut a piece of backing fabric that is exactly the same size. We're going to sew right sides together. I'm going to once again do a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. We're going to close the whole thing up, and then I'm going to show you how we open it up, how we stuff it, and then we will be done. Okay, we have sewn all the way around all 4 sides of our pillow, and now we just want to trim it a little bit. I don't have much of a seam here, so again, I don't think I need to trim too much. I'm going to mostly clip those corners. Trim a little bit here. Trim that down a little bit. It's a small seam, so we don't need to do too much, but we also don't want any bulk on those edges, so let's just trim that down a little bit. And then we will be able to turn our design and see what we've got. One thing I wanted to mention is it's possible that you can still use your frame if you've cut it too short. If you've got enough room, you could sew some fabric that is very close in color to the edges, and then it may work in your frame. It may give you enough fabric to turn under so that you don't have to do something besides the frame. It just depends on your frame and how short you've cut it. Another time you might want to sew extra fabric strips onto your fabric is if you have a piece of cross-stitch fabric that is just perfect for your design. It'll fit, but it won't fit in your hoop. You have your favorite Q-snap. You always like to stitch with the 11 by 11 Q-snap, say, and the piece of fabric's not going to fit in there. You can sew some extra fabric around the edges. You can stitch in your favorite frame, and then when you're done, you can just trim off that extra fabric, and the stitched piece is still the size you wanted it to be. Okay, how do we do this? Now, we turn it on the back side, and we make sure we have just the backing fabric. We find the approximate center, and we also want to, in my case, I want my opening to be this way, horizontal. So I want to make sure my design's facing the right way. And I'm going to take some sharp scissors and just do a little poke there. And then I'm going to extend that a little bit horizontally, both ways, just enough for me to be able to turn my pillow. Okay, we're going to sew that up in a little bit, so don't worry about it. I actually prefer this method of turning the pillow and stuffing. Anytime I try to stuff the pillow from the bottom edge and then sew it up, it doesn't fill as well. For some reason, filling from the center works better for me. I get all four corners a little better. Okay, turn that around. I can use my little pointy stick to get in the corners and poke them out a little bit. And then we'll get to turn it around and see what we've got. Oops, I've got a hole there, so I'm going to need to turn it again and sew that up, but I'll do that in just a second. I want to show you what this looks like first of all. Looks like I had a piece of fabric that wasn't cut just right, but I'll be able to sew that seam again and fix it. Okay, so here's what it looks like. I like it. I like it a lot. I think it looks great. Now I'm going to get my Fiberfill. And to use this, you want to break it up. You want to kind of break it up before you stuff it in there. If you just do full pieces, it just doesn't work as well. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit here because I do have to take this apart and sew that whole opening. Just going to stuff it in a little bit at a time. It's going to take quite a bit of stuffing. You're going to make sure your corners are full. You're going to fill it up all the way. Don't worry about this opening in the center. We're going to fill it all up, and then I will show you how to sew this closed and how to cover that opening so it's nice and hidden. I'm going to do that, fix this hole here, and be right back. Okay, my pillow is all stuffed. I was able to fix that corner that had the little hole in it. I think it turned out really nicely. I love the way it looks. So now that it's all stuffed, let's go ahead and close the back. I have some matching thread that I've knotted on one end, and I have a sharp point or chenille needle. What we're going to do is we're going to bury the knot inside. So I'm going to start underneath and get that knot inside. Now I'm just going to kind of pull this closed and do a quick little whip stitch all the way down. It's going to just need to close so the stuffing doesn't come out. We're going to cover it so it's not ugly. If it helps, this is a bigger hole than I sometimes work with, so if you want to pin this to make it a little bit easier to sew, you can. Just kind of grab this here, and I'm just going to go back and forth and so close up that hole, just so that the stuffing doesn't come out. And then we'll cover it up. I'm not worried about this being neat. I'm just worried about it closing the hole so that the stuffing doesn't fall out. Gets a little easier once you get started. And then we can trim off the extra stuffing that always seems to be sticking out. But I really like stuffing the pillow from the back side. It seems a lot better to me. I get better coverage. I always have those floppy corners otherwise. This way, the last thing that gets stuffed is the center, and that seems to work out better. Whoops. Now you can, of course, finish this with the opening on the bottom or the side if you prefer. Come on. Make sure you do have that sharp point needle so it goes through the fabric easily. You don't want to cross stitch needle with the dull point. And if you have lots of time, you can make this look prettier than I'm making mine look right now. But I just want to get it done so you can see the next part. Just grab a little bit of fabric on each side and pull that stitch closed. There you go. Almost done. Couple more stitches here. And then I'll trim that stuffing off that seems to want to come out. All right, to finish off my knot, let me trim that right now. There we go. To finish off my knot, I can kind of do a couple little loops here. Kind of knotted it right there, and now I'm just going to bury the knot, which means I'm going to pull my thread all the way through and just clip it right there. So not pretty at all, but I'm going to trim off the extra stuffing. And then what I like to do is put these felt shapes on the back, and I found these hearts that I think are going to look, and these are covered with fuzz too. I think these are going to look really nice on the back like this. And I'm just going to glue them on. You could, of course, sew them on as well, but I'm just going to use some Aleene's tacky glue and glue them on like that. You can use anything you want on the back. You can use a strip of wool. I like the little shapes, and I got this whole bag of heart-shaped felt pieces from Amazon. You can buy all kinds of different things. I'm going to glue those on, and then we'll look at our finished product. So here's our finished pillow. I think it turned out even better than the framed version I had in mind. So the mistake worked out well. I have the back finished with those cute little hearts that I told you about. You can put anything you want on there. You can put a name tag. I think it's a nice way to finish it off, and it's so much easier to stuff from the back side. I hope you enjoyed today's video, but if you have any questions, comments, please let me know down below. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on anything. I will see you again soon.